For those of you that might be new here, you need to know that I am a quintessential draft nuffy. Don't ask me why, but the draft is something that I've always taken a keen interest in, and it's always done well on the channel. You guys have really gotten around that kind of content, so why not we do this way too early? Now, you might be thinking there is no way the ladder ends up like this at the end of the year, and I would agree with you. But if you think your club is going to get a better or a worse pick towards the end of the season, you can still look at players who I believe will be around that mark, and you might follow them throughout the year. Or you might just enjoy the video. You can take this as seriously as you want to, but keeping an eye out on the next generation of AFL players will leave us all in a better place come draft time. So let's get into it. The first mock draft of the year, once a month. We're in April. Let's go. So pick one, of course, HARLEY REID, and at this point in time, he ends up at the Hawks. Whether he's at the Hawks or the Eagles, he's going at pick one. And I don't think 3 first-round picks for pick one for a Hawthorn or a West Coast is going to be the way to go at all. If you're going to go for pick one, you are going to need to offer up at least one player who fits the mold. Now, a Hawthorn going to get a tall forward or a tall defender from another club in order for them to move up to pick one along with some first-round picks? I think not. I don't think West Coast are going to get a bona fide mid plus other picks for their pick one if they do get it either. So I think pick one stays where it is. Hawks or West Coast, they're both going to go for HARLEY, and for good reason. Now, I really hate this Dusty 2.0 talk that goes around this young man who is averaging well over 20 disposals and a goal a game to start the Coates Talent League season, formerly known as the TAC Cup. But that fend off, I can understand where the comparisons are coming from. I don't really see him as that 30-35 disposal breakout getter just yet. But can he develop into that as the year goes on? Absolutely he can. But in April, as it stands right now, he's the best kid in the country, and he's going to go to the worst side. Pick 2, Gold Coast, ASHTON MOIR. Now, I've heard some people call him ASHTON MOIR. I have no idea whether that's correct or not, but I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that. So if someone wants to correct me in the comments, whether you know him or not, that would be appreciated. Dazzling with last names sometimes can get himself into a little bit of trouble, and geez, don't my NFL podcast co-hosts know that more than anyone. But this South Australian lad forward to centre is one of the more dangerous players for his age you will see. Brilliant off both feet, and once that ball hits the 50 and he is involved, goals, scores do happen. I think he's top 3 material no matter what, but if Hawthorn or West Coast have 1 and 2, I think he does slip to 3. I don't think West Coast or Hawthorn need him, so whoever does finish third last, and hopefully that club does need a small forward presence, they really won't need to do that much, and he could get to them. I think he does get to them, but Gold Coast are going to need a replacement for Isaac Rankin. When the ball hits the ground inside their forward 50, they're still relying on Alex Sexton, Darcy McPherson, and these sort of guys. ASHTON brings a genuine point of difference inside that forward 50, and his combination with the likes of Bailey Humphrey or Elijah Hollins, if they're rotating on a half-forward flank, as well as getting to the feet of Ben King and potentially their next draftee that we'll talk about in just a tick, or Joel Casbolt, whoever may be there as the youngsters develop, is going to be pretty dangerous. So he'll join a gluttony of top 5 picks, maybe, if Gold Coast can get him. Pick 3, West Coast, ZANE DUURSMA. This is my man in this draft. Like Finn Callahan before him, this is the kid that I am putting my stake in, my money in. I am buying ZANE DUURSMA's stock. The boy from Gippsland Power stands at 190 centimetres and is a powerful forward half player who can impact at the stoppage. He had 24 and kicked 1 goal, 2 in his first game of the Talent League here in Victoria, as well as 16 disposals, and hit the scoreboard again in round 3. I love how powerful this young man is, and the more that he grows, the more impact that he's able to have on games, the better he is going to be. Impact per possession is one of the highest it looks in this draft, and I cannot wait to see how he goes for the rest of the year. Giants, pick 4, Nick Watson. Speaking of ASHTON MOIR and guys that would be ultra dangerous inside 50, the Wizard, as Cal Toomey coined him last year, is a genuine freak of nature. He's the kind of guy who you would expect, a bit like Kozzy Pickett, to be on all of the Channel 7 Twitter highlights, or Facebook highlights, but he's the kind of guy that we're going to look at and go, he can do things most other players can't. And like Kozzy Pickett at Melbourne, he's been able to rotate through the middle and create some damage as well. However, when we got to round 3 of the Talent League, this man went bunter, playing a majority midfield game and having 34 disposals and genuinely taking the PI55. Toby Green needs some mates in that forward 50 that aren't 6'5" and struggling for form. Nick Watson to the Giants is a fit that I absolutely love, and whether it's him or Ashton Moore that the Giants pick up, if they do have a top 5 pick, and I suspect that they might, they have got 2 very capable youngsters that they will be keeping a very close eye on in this draft. Melbourne, pick 5, Nate Caddy. Now, they've got Freo's first round pick here, the D's, and they tried trading up for Bailey Humphrey last year, but they don't need to at this point in time because Nate Caddy is kind of the Bailey Humphrey of last year. Now, he is coming off a fibular fracture, but in his 2 games back, he's combined for just over 25 disposals, and he has kicked goals as well. 5 of them, in fact, over his 2 games. He is going to just grow and grow and grow throughout the year, and hopefully with no injury setbacks, not that we can predict them anyway, I suspect he is going to be taken in the single digits, and Melbourne, one of those teams with 2 first-round picks, will be keeping a very close eye on him and potentially trading up for him. But in terms of who Melbourne need out of this draft, he and ZANE DUURSMA are the 2 that I suspect, like last year with Humphrey, they will trade up and try to get. But as it sits right now, if Freo keep going like a busted, they might not have to. Pick 6, Geelong, Archer Reid. Now, I don't suspect the Cats are going to have a pick this good at the end of the season, but there are guys like this, as in Talls, towards the back end of the draft, so Cats fans, stick around and you can have a look at those guys and judge for yourselves. But Archer Reid, to whoever team does end up drafting him, is going to be a freak. The younger brother of Zach, he is 203 centimeters tall and one of the best runners for his size already. It is genuinely freakish the amount of ground this man covers, and Daz Talks Footy, very good friend of the channel, Jake Smithy, the man himself, reckons he saw him kick 11 in an under-18s game at just 15 years old. If he can continue his form, he is going to be a top 10 pick. And like Melbourne taking Van Ruin and Matty Jefferson in the first round of drafts, I suspect Reid is going to go higher in the draft if he can continue his fantastic form. But the Cats would be looking at him and tall forwards like him in the hope to replace Tom Hawkins in the next 2 or 3 years. Pick 7, the Giants, KOLTYN THOLSTRUP. Now that is a fantastic name, first of all, but yet another forward mid in this draft that is capable of taking the next step. He kicked 2 goals a game for Subi in the Waffle under-18s last year, but he has cracked the league side this year. Yes, he only had the 15 disposals, but he kicked 1 goal 3 and got involved. But where I think Waffle and Sandful numbers are not that good compared to the Victorian numbers, you think of why Jason Horne-Francis was loved more than Nick Dacos coming out of the draft year, regardless of how incorrect that looks now, is because Waffle Seniors is not the same as under-18s here in Victoria. 15 disposals and 1 goal 3 mightn't look that fantastic on paper, but this is an 18-year-old kid playing against men. Can't wait to see how he goes. The Giants, they need more forward half players, and he would be one to look at, as well as, of course, ZANE DUURSMA and Nate Caddy. I have KOLTYN third in line amongst those forward mid players, but anything can change as the year goes on. But the Giants are one of those teams, along with Melbourne, like I said before, looking at these guys rather closely. Doggies, pick 8, Will Patton. Now, I don't think Patton goes this high if the Bulldogs aren't at this pick, but he is a 192cm Jordan Ridley type of interceptor who's not afraid to go for his marks. But the reason why I think he's such a good fit at a club like the Dogs is he's going to be able to reinvigorate guys like Bailey Dale, Caleb Daniel, whether Jason Johannesson is there long term. But the Bulldogs right now have either got really small guys that don't defend and just rebound, or tall defenders that don't really rebound but are doing their best at defending. Patton is one of those guys that is going to be able to bridge the gap and make a more creative Dogs back 6 as he grows. The Dogs drafted, of course, Jed Buslinger last year at centre half back have just added Simon O'Donnell's boy, who is another tall, so they're definitely not going to go for someone over the 195 centimetre mark. And drafting Charlie Clark last year to pair with Cody Waitman moving forward kind of solves their small forward stocks with Latham Vandermeer, who needs to come back from his injury. I think PATTON is a perfect fit and a guy that I think I'm going to be mocking to the Bulldogs for a long, long time this year, regardless of where they end up. Pick 9, North, Daniel Curtin. The first time we've got back-to-back picks in this draft. North, at this point in time, because they've got Port Adelaide's first-round pick as well for the Jason Horne-Francis trade. Now, Daniel Curtin is on the basis that Ben McKay is not there. I think with McKay, Logue, and Aiden Core, they're not really going to draft a centre-half back. Now, we know North just want to draft midfielders, and that's seemingly all they want to do with their first-round picks. Of course, with Sheasel, Wardlaw, Will Phillips, these guys going relatively high in the draft. Of course, Sheasel not being used as a midfielder at this point in time, where he is just picking up every disposal he can on the half-back line, but at some point they need to look after their spine. Now, with Archer Reid off the board, I do truly believe that Reid to North would be the best fit, but as it stands right now in the draft, they don't pick him up. However, if North's form does begin to deteriorate and they are falling down the ladder, Reid to North is just chef's kiss for not only Nick Larkey, Charlie Comben, as Archer Reid continues to grow as well. It's going to be better for Clarko as well. If you don't remember, Clarko had Ruff and had Bud. Clearly, he loves the two tall forward setup. He's going to need another one. But alas, if Ben McKay does go, and of course they do have the 2 picks, Daniel Curtin is going to be on their radar as well. He does something that not many 18-year-olds do. He defends. Coming out of the draft, Denver Granger Barris was noted for his intercept defending and his ability to fly for marks, but he's getting caught out at the Hawks now for not actually getting back shoulder and stopping his opponents from marking the ball. Daniel Curtin does that and would be a perfect fit at North if Ben McKay does go. Now, he's not Ben McKay yet, as we know. McKay's had 8 years in the system now, but geez, if you walked out of the draft with, say, Archer Reid and Daniel Curtin, if you're a North Melbourne supporter, geez, you're buying a lot of stock, and you might be doing so even if you're not a North Melbourne supporter. North again, pick 10, Jack DELEAN. Now, they drafted Braden George, who is essentially going to be a new recruit next year. They've got Paul Curtis already down there, Cameron Zurhaar, and the like, but the creativity of DELEAN cannot be denied. Touted as a star from the age of 16, the South Australian product is going to be under the noses of a lot of teams this year, whether a team like the Bulldogs go after DELEAN for his small forward craft to pair with Waitman and Charlie Clark, but North here are getting a guy forward of centre that is going to cause problems. For better or worse, North's back 6 seems relatively settled right now compared to the rest of their mix. You got guys like Tristan Sherry, who's going to take over from Todd Goldstein. I've already got Daniel Curtin overtaking Ben McKay if he does choose to leave at the end of the year. They still need that forward pressure inside that forward 50, and DELEAN does provide that. Zurhaar, yes, he's a bull, he's an X-Factor kind of player. Not a great fan of tackling. Braden George didn't have massive tackle numbers coming out of his draft. Curtis is a flyer, and yes, his pressure has been pretty good this year, but DELEAN is the kind of small forward that wants to pressure his opponents and make them pay on the scoreboard, and would be a really good fit if North could somehow get another first-round pick. But Curtin and DELEAN, if the draft was right now, would be a hell of a start for the boys from Arden Street. Pick 11, Gold Coast, Jed Walter. Now, because of the draft concessions, Gold Coast would have to match a bid for Walter, whereas they wouldn't have to if it was another club. Blame the AFL for that for all that you want to. But Jed is the best tall forward in the draft already. Now, he is ahead of Reid according to draft scouts for his ability to, over that first 20 metres in a straight line, to be lightning quick, and apparently has a really good set shot technique as well. Only watching 1 or 2 highlights means that you can't really get a good grasp of someone's goal-kicking ability just yet, but I'll take the word of the people that know. In reality, I suspect the better that Walter goes this season, the better the bid is going to come and the more points the Gold Coast are going to have to give up, which is why they only drafted Bailey Humphrey last year. They have been stockpiling points and ready for most situations, but essentially, Gold Coast are going to get another 2 top 10 picks at the end of the year, and they better hope they turn out well. If you haven't seen my last video on the Suns, you should go and check it out. But Walter right now is fighting with Reid to be the best key tall in the draft, but no one else is really going to have access to him. Pick 12, the Bulldogs, KOLBY MCKERCHER. Now, again, Josh Dunkley trade means the Bulldogs have got Brisbane's first round pick, and this guy is a balanced mid. Yes, Luke Beveridge apparently just doesn't want to use a midfield properly for most of the Bulldogs games, but their last fortnight has been better with the Bont, McRae, Treloar, all of these guys rotating through. I've got my doubts over whether a guy like Riley West, Riley Garcia, these kind of guys are really going to be bona fide mids. You are going to need an engine room in that midfield to continually rotate through with the likes of Libba and the guys I've already mentioned. KOLBY solves those kind of problems. He knows how to find the footy. He's tough, he's hard, he can play inside, he can play outside, and he started his year off really well. He's going to be one of those guys I feel like is going to get read out on draft night to not a lot of applause, or even the draft nuffies are going to be like, oh yeah, he would go around this spot, but I genuinely think he could be one of the better players from this draft. I like the look of him, and he's got that footy IQ that is pretty difficult to train. Helps that he's had 31 disposals in both of his Talent League games though, just saying. Pick 13, Adelaide, Will Lorenz. The grandson of Hawthorn's Team of the Century skipper and first premiership captain in Graham Arthur, Lorenz is an outside mid who would add to an Adelaide midfield with the likes of Laird, Keys, Berry, and these guys who like diving in on the footy and extracting the ball out. Lorenz would be a good complement for that. I do worry about his size and how that would fit inside Adelaide's midfield, but when you're as clever as he is, sometimes you've just got to live with it, I suppose. He has started on a half-forward flank for his under-18 side a little bit, as underages are being used in the midfield just to sort themselves out a little bit. I expect his draft stock to rise throughout the year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. I don't expect the Crows to have a pick that is either way higher or way lower than this one. I think KOLBY MCKERCHER would be a really good fit for the Crows if they could pick him up, but Lorenz to the Crows at this point is still a massive tick. Pick 14, Hawthorn, Will McCabe. Now, the Swans would generally have this pick at this point, but as we saw last year, they are pricks when it comes to bidding on players, so let's assume they'll do it to the Hawks, and they'll pick up Will McCabe. Now, the Hawks desperately need a tall forward. They do. The problem is that the son of late 90s, early 2000s player Luke, who's already got about 3 foot on his old man at this point, is that he is predominantly a defender. However, in the last season, he did move forward a little bit, and the Hawks are desperately crying out for someone to be a foil for Mitch Lewis. Jacob Kazitsky hasn't really come on as much as they would have liked. Emerson Jacka looks probably not at the level at this point. And if Hawthorn can come away from the first round, kind of like they did with Cam McKenzie and Josh Weddle last year, with HARLEY, REID / ZANE DUURSMA, who I believe is the second best player in this draft and the second best fit for the Hawks, one of those and McCabe to end day one of the draft is just awesome. And as a Hawks fan, that makes me really excited. But it's going to take time. Like everything and like this rebuild, McCabe isn't going to come in and be a star straight away, but if we can just start to see enough, it'll be another successful day one for the Hawks. Swans, pick 15, Mitchell Edwards, the premier ruck at Peel Thunder, and let's face it, the Swans need one. They got rid of Sam Naismith, who will probably be picked up in the mid-season draft later this year by a club. Hello, Collingwood, if you are listening. However, the Swans can't really win a flag with Peter Ladhams and not much else. I don't think Hayden McLean is going to be their second ruck of the future. Joel Amati needs to play forward, can't go into the ruck, and Hickey, look, he's just getting on in age and his body's letting him down. Having Edwards come in for a list that doesn't really have a whole lot of holes is going to be awesome. This man usurped Jackson Broadbent, it was. I completely forgot what his name was for a second there, but Jackson Broadbent, who I really liked last year, and Mitchell Edwards was better than him last year. So it's going to be pretty good. Like Harry Barnett to the Eagles last year, I expect Edwards here to be the first ruck name read out. It's going to be to either Sydney or Collingwood, in my opinion. At this point, Sydney have a better pick than the Pies, so I've got him going to the Swans. Sometimes this draft stuff can be almost too simple. Pick 16, Collingwood, Logan Morris. Now, the problem with this, kind of like when you do NFL mock drafts and it gets to the Las Vegas Raiders, we have to rely on the fact that Collingwood are actually going to fix a list hole. They need a tall forward, and Morris is a traditional centre-half forward. Now, at 193 centimetres, potentially not as tall as your traditional centre-half forwards, but at 18, you are still growing, so let's give the kid a chance. But his aerobic work is awesome. His athletic profile reads very nicely for clubs, and according to those that have seen him a bit more than I have so far, his goal-kicking routine is awesome. Hey, Collingwood, any chance you can go into a finals game where your tall forwards is not Brody Myercheck and Ash Johnson? Any chance? Essendon, pick 17, Patrick WECKART. Now, I believe that Essendon, again, are going to have a better pick than 17 come the end of the season, but kind of like Collingwood with Morris, they could come in and snatch him up. I believe a guy forward of centre inside that forward 50 is going to be the way that Essendon need to go, and frankly, they do need some help there. Harrison Jones is still developing. Peter Wright is already the finished product, and Sam Wiedemann is good. He's been good this year, but Essendon don't have as many list holes as you might think they do. It's just a talented group developing together. So adding in a guy who you might look at and just think the Jack Gunston type, as in that third tall forward to help out. No pressure on anyone that gets compared to Gunners. But Patrick is the kind of player who leads up at the footy and has reward. It's not that bad for the Bombers, but they can't keep this midfield group and then go get, say, a KOLBY MCKERCHER. It doesn't make sense. Just fill the positional need, and I still think they need an athletic third forward type, and he fits the bill. I think they'll be keeping an eye on him and Logan Morris, but for me, the Dons are one of the more unpredictable teams, so we'll wait and see. Pick 18, Melbourne. I'm just going to go with NP because of the 3 times I've heard this dude's name read out loud. They've pronounced it 3 completely different ways, and as someone who had primary school teachers look at RHYS and think, his parents definitely named him Rice, this is not really what I want to do to a young man, so I'm just going to stick with NP, and if someone can fortifiably correct me in the comments below, I'm sticking with that. But the Ds, they don't really need much at the moment, especially because they filled their utility role with Jacob Van Ruin, and they picked up Matty Jefferson last year. We know their midfield group is good. We know they've got talls. Maybe a project athletic half-back could be the answer, which is what this young man can produce. Now, he's a little bit unpredictable. Not Sam Frost unpredictable, but he does get the ball. He runs quick, but what he does with the footy can leave a little to be desired. Now, when you've got a player like that, the best thing that you can do is put him into a good system, get the rough edges maybe out of his game a little bit, not too much, because you still need personality, and the Ds would be a really good fit. I suspect the Demons are going to have a pretty high pick in the first round. So, high as in number, not high as in reading out first. Does that even make sense? Who cares? The Demons are going to have a pick, I suspect, better than 15. There you go. Call that as you will. And I think this kind of player would suit them. But again, who really knows about the Ds right now? They're probably just going to take best talent available, and this young man could absolutely be that. Carlton, pick 19, Cooper Simpson. Really like this kid. Mid forward, again, there's a bit of a theme going on here, but he is one of the smaller ones at 181 centimetres. However, the Blues, yes, they've got guys like Corey Durden and Jesse Motlop, who are forward 50 players that need to create some chaos around the feet of Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow. This young man is the type that is going to impact forward of centre at stoppage and can also rotate through that midfield as well. Picked up 28 disposals in his most recent under-18s game here in Victoria, but his ability to hit the scoreboard in important moments last year for Dandenong as they went to the TAC Cup, as it was known back then, grand final, was vital. And when a teammate like Henry Huswaite gets drafted last year, I suspect he is going to go as well. Is he going to be like a Huswaite and slide? Potentially, but as we sit here right now, the Blues and he, or a forward mid-type player, I think is a really nice fit. So here is where he is. And pick 20, the Saints, who saw that coming, Kane McAuliffe. Now, what I really like about this kid, apart from the 31 disposals that he's averaging in the sample under 18s at this point, is his ability to get his hands out of a tackle break the tackle or get his arms out and feed his teammates. Averaging nearly 110 Supercoach points early, which, yes, isn't the be-all and end-all, I understand. But a bit like KOLBY MCKERCHER, because these guys aren't looked at as forward, mid, they're not these new hybrid players, they might end up being not as loved throughout the draft. But let me tell you, this kid is a genuine footballer. And one of the ones in this list I'm going to be keeping a closer eye out on as the season progresses. I don't suspect the Saints to have picked 20 in this first round with Walter and McCabe having their bids matched. But I really like what this kid can do. And whoever does pick him up, in my opinion, is going to get a really smart footballer. So that's it, guys. Comment below, let me know what you think. Do you want me to keep doing this? I hope so. I love the draft content. You can catch the last video in the description below. Hope you have a fantastic day. It is hump day. Looking forward to round 5. Another video coming very, very soon. Goodbye.